If you've watched YouTubers such as Footy Adventures or Rise Football Paradise, you may have seen their videos covering the abandoned stadium of Aylesbury United FC, a ground that's famous for hosting one of football's most unusual friendlies between the non-league side and the England national team during their warm-up games for their 1988 European Championship. That's a non-league side up against the likes of Peter Shilton, John Barnes, Glenn Hoddle, Chris Waddle and Gary Lineker, captained by Brian Robson and managed by the hugely popular Sir Bobby Robson. With the novelty of this ground hosting such an unusual game, I wanted to go and have a look for myself and see what was left in 2024, although what I discovered wasn't quite what I expected. As has been well documented in the recent few years on YouTube, that stadium is now no longer in use. It is in fact abandoned, and speaking of which, I may have potentially just found a way in. I've already seen the floodlights from the stadium on the way in here, and I can see a digger. That's not massively promising. Perhaps the work that's been waiting for the last couple of years may actually be coming into fruition. We are walking through. See what we can see. Crikey, I've been stung so many times by stinging nettles. Okay, so there's your answer to whether or not it's actually being demolished, and the answer is yes. As you can see, the field is absolutely dense with construction evidence, but also stuff like diggers over there. There's even a tractor further down there. Not what I was expecting, but interesting to see what is actually going on here. I can't see any people currently working on the site, but what you can see is obviously a lot of rubble. Like I said, there's no one currently working on the site, not that I can see anyway, but this is absolutely not what I was expecting. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't planning on walking into a flourishing stadium, because that's obviously not what this place is. There have been talks for a long time about whether or not works would be done on this place, because they wanted to make houses on here, a residential area, which I know for the people currently living just over that way, they are not massively keen on the idea because of problems such as sewage. For example, where's that going to go? I mean, one of the biggest problems with this place was it would flood quite frequently. A lot of the Aylesbury United games actually got called off because of a waterlogged pitch, and that's because Thames, slightly over that way, runs just alongside it, which then made building on this property, or this piece of land, sorry, really troublesome. But I'm just going to show you guys around, because you can see they've turfed out all the seats, and that is currently the only stand that is still somewhat remaining, or what is left of it, with all of the rubble obviously that we've just walked past. Shit. I'd been rumbled. Those three famous words that everyone knows roughly translates to, "What are you doing here?" One of the construction workers had caught me red-handed, but in fairness, he was really nice about it and basically told me that it just wasn't safe because of all of the debris and loose smack needles laying around. That, and they were liable to anything that happened to me. So with that, my journey was over, and all that was left for me to do was to sit down on my own next to the River Thames and debrief before the next venture. We can't actually film in there, and in all honesty, I may very well be the last person who actually goes in there to film anything, because as we've seen, it's completely being turfed out. It's really not what I was expecting, but there's needles everywhere, there's God knows what everywhere. Another problem that a lot of the local residents had with people coming in here, whether it's myself or just anyone, is that more often than not, the people that come here aren't just having a look around for the sake of the history. They're coming around essentially to do things with needles. I'll let you fill in the gaps there. But Aylesbury used to be a really good non-league side. They won awards on their pitch for how well kept it was, which obviously is ironic now looking at the state of it. But the reason why Aylesbury don't play there anymore is because Aylesbury couldn't afford to keep on paying the stadium lease. There was a disagreement between those who own the stadium and the club, which then forced Aylesbury for the best part of 2 decades to actually be forced to ground share and play their games outside of Aylesbury. It's only recently that the club have actually managed to secure a lease at a stadium in Aylesbury. So they are now back, which is obviously a positive, but for understandable reasons, obviously not back over there. I'm not entirely sure, if I'm being completely honest, what is actually going to happen now on that ground. I think this is sort of the long-awaited step one of clearing what is there, to then build at some point what's on there. But there's been so many failed planning permissions, estates and houses and stuff is what they wanted to use the land for. But it's just not looking feasible at the moment with just how unstable the ground is. Once again, having that running alongside it caused the pitch to frequently flood and games to be called off. How it's expected to build new properties on top of that, it's going to take a lot of work and most importantly a lot of money, which are they going to invest that? Are the people who already live here going to be happy with that? No is probably the answer. So if I'm being completely honest, I think that it's just going to be knocked down for the time being and it's going to be a long time before anything gets built on there. But it is unfortunately now, as we've seen, the end of Aylesbury FC's old stadium. Which seems like the best time to reflect properly on that weird game back in the summer of '88. Wet 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 were #1 in the charts with their cover of Beatles' song With a Little Help from My Friends and She's Leaving Home. Steffi Graf had just won her second consecutive French Open and England were gearing up for their 1988 Euros campaign. Nowadays we'd see the Three Lions taking on fellow national teams like Bosnia and Herzegovina or Iceland, but back then Bobby Robson had other ideas. It was their final warm-up game before the competition's second favourites flew off to Germany after topping their qualifying group with all the stars on show. As a result, the Aylesbury United players were told not to tackle the England players too hard in order to avoid injuries, but the 6,031 fans shoehorned into the ground, as well as those hanging from a tree, were still treated to an entertaining spectacle, with the Three Lions running out 7-0 winners on the day. Weirdly, however, a match-up against a group of amateur footballers who hadn't played a game for 4 weeks didn't spur England on to win the tournament, as they crashed out in the group stages, losing all 3 of their games to the Republic of Ireland, the Soviet Union and the eventual winners, the Netherlands. So just behind this gate, which I assume was the gate used for, players' entrances and also fans' entrances, just further down you can see the clubhouse. Now the clubhouse, there are pictures in there of the likes of Peter Beardsley, is the first one that springs to mind, taken from that infamous game where England played here at Aylesbury United. And other than that, there is nothing else that I can show you, ladies and gentlemen. You've seen the state of the pitch at the moment. You've seen what is happening to it, and you can assume what it's going to look like in a couple of weeks. So, if anything, this is your video to say, don't bother going, because there's nothing else here. Whilst I think it is positive to obviously get rid of something that's derelict and not going to be used anymore, there's obviously that part of it which is quite sad to think that that bit of history, that quirky bit of trivia, England playing a non-league team or even a football league team just wouldn't happen these days. Can you imagine the likes of Marcus Rashford or Jude Bellingham walking through those gates that we just looked at to go and play a non-league team? Or similarly, a team closer to you guys. Imagine your local non-league team and now imagine the England national team. It just wouldn't happen. It's just not safe. But of course, once again, it's very sad to see that that is being removed. The locals, as I say, will be quite happy about that. Just is one less spot for crackheads, really. Look, you can see what it's like now. You can see how it is. But ladies and gentlemen, all good things must come to an end. A bit like this video, which I'm going to sign out now. Thank you very, very much for watching as always. Long live Aylesbury United. They've got a bright new future now, and unfortunately it's this part of its past which will now no longer exist as it once was. But ladies and gentlemen, if you have enjoyed, please let me know in the comments down below. And similarly, if you've got any abandoned stadiums that aren't being turfed down, are still there, and actually you've got something for me to look at, comment them down below, because I definitely want to keep doing these things. It's very interesting, a bit of a history lesson. I like my history, so that works for me. If it works for you and it works for me, it's a match made in heaven. But ladies and gentlemen, I will see you guys very, very soon. Thank you very much for watching as always. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, peace and love.